Hello. We all have those distant relatives. You know, the ones that come for free food at all the celebration time. Or also we have those distant relatives that we don't even know. We know their names, but we've never met them. You know, the last week I had the opportunity to have a good friend visit from China, and I was amazed at all the things they do with their families, their relatives, and their ancestors. Such respect. It's wonderful to see. But in both cultures, I couldn't help but wonder to myself this question: would either culture, in a situation where a distant relative that we don't know comes to us, would we buy them a house? Would we marry them and raise their children and support them for the rest of their life? I don't think so. And yet, that's exactly what happened in a story I want to talk about today. It's a story from the Bible and is familiar to most Christians. It's the story of Ruth. Just a quick background. Elimelech and his wife Naomi, they had a couple of boys, and things were bad. And where they lived in Bethlehem, famine, they couldn't survive anymore. They had to sell their land off, at least temporarily, and move away. And they had to move away to another country. And there, the two boys married some local girls, and everything seemed like a new life for them until the husband, Elimelech, died. Then the two boys died, and all that Naomi had left was just the two daughter-in-laws. And so she decided she was going to move back to Bethlehem. Things apparently had improved in the 10 years since they'd left. And so she was going back there, and one of the girls decided that she was going to go back with Naomi. That was Ruth. And Ruth wasn't a Jew, but she was going anyway, and she wasn't going to be well received here in the country, that's for sure. And when they got back there, that's when things really got funny. I mean, they didn't have any money, they didn't have any place to live, they didn't have anything, and they didn't have any food. And so what Naomi said to Ruth was, look, it's the time of harvest. Why don't you just go out in the fields? The guys are harvesting all the grains right now. And when they go through it, they leave stuff that just falls down. So just pick it up, glean from the floor with whatever you've got, and bring it back, and we'll eat that. That's what we'll do. And so that's what she did. And Ruth went out and went around, and she found this farm where this rich Jewish guy who was having the crops all harvested. So she went there, and it turned out this guy his name was Boaz. And Boaz saw Ruth, and he really liked her. He wanted to marry her. And so he asked one of his servants there. We don't know who that was, but they asked him who was it, and he told her, and it came from Naomi. And he went over to talk to her, and I said, you can just stay here, just stay as often as you want, come back as often as you want. And she went home and told Naomi what had happened, and Naomi was really excited. I mean, really excited, because Boaz was a distant relative. And this in the Jewish culture, that distant relative, that kinsman of hers, he had the right to buy back the property that her husband had let go of many years ago. It was a custom. And he could redeem the property. He could be the kinsman redeemer and redeem the property for Naomi. And Naomi also knew that in the family, if there was a widow and there was no son, she had the right to ask the redeemer to marry her so that she could have a son and carry on the bloodline. And so Naomi said, hey, look, tonight when things get dark, you're going to find Boaz is asleep beside that big pile of grain. He doesn't want anybody to take anything. So go there when he's sleeping, lay down beside him. When he wakes up, say, would you put the hem of your garment over me? That seems kind of crude in our ways of living today. But back then it meant something. You see, the hem of the garment had little tassels on it. It was like an officer would have something on his shoulder. It showed authority. It was the authority. I mean, that's why when King David cut off the hem of Saul's garment, he was cutting off the authority of Saul. It was pretty important. And so that's exactly what Saul knew. When she asked him to put the hem of the garment on, she's saying, put your authority on me, marry me, and redeem the land for Naomi. And he said, okay. But there was a problem. There was another person that was closer to Naomi than he was, a closer redeemer. And so the other person had the first right of refusal. So next morning he got up, got witnesses, went out into the market, and there was the guy. And he says, hey, you got the field here, the land, and it's your right if you want to buy it. He says, yeah, I want to buy it. And he says, okay. And in addition, there's a woman, a widow, and you'd have to marry her. She's a Moab woman, and he didn't want to do that. So he said no, and that kind of shamed him because he wasn't going to live up to his requirements. So that required him to take one of his shoes off and give it to Boaz, so Boaz could then go ahead and do it. What was a shame for this man was not a shame for Boaz. It was his marriage license, and he married Ruth, and he redeemed the land for Naomi. And that's just where the story starts, you see, because in Scripture, in the things in the Bible, these stories, they seem to parallel things that happen in the spiritual world. For example, when Boaz redeemed the land for Naomi, God redeemed Israel for all the people from when they escaped from Egypt. When Boaz agreed to marry a non-Jewish person and take her for his wife, God says to us in his new covenant, and you can read about it in Jeremiah 31, he says, I take you as a Gentile, and this is my new covenant. I'm going to write my laws on your heart, and you'll be mine. You'll be my bride. And it's interesting because the man who was first had the rights to Naomi, or to Ruth, I should say, in the spiritual world, that was the law. They had the first rights to us. But what the law couldn't do, then obviously Jesus did. And what the man couldn't do, Boaz did. And it actually, Ruth was supposed to come and ask the kinsman redeemer to marry her and to redeem the land. But Boaz took that on for himself. He redeemed it on our behalf, on the behalf of Naomi. And God redeemed us through the death of Jesus Christ. Oh, there's a lot to this story, my friends. God is a good God, and he tells us in all these things. So today, I don't know where you stand. Do you feel that you're just not good enough, that you lost everything and you should be maybe moving to a different land, maybe starting all over again? Maybe you're like that and you need somebody to redeem you and buy back the land for you and marry you. That's God. Just ask him. He's come into your heart. He'll write his laws upon your heart. He'll redeem the land for you. He'll marry you. You'll be in a new relationship with a new covenant with God. He's promised it to us. Hey, thanks for listening to me tonight. And I'll see you tomorrow or next week when I do this again. Anyway, bye for now. Good night.